VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we'd like to welcome you to another week here on Crosstalk on the VCY America Network. My name is Jim Schneider, and we appreciate you tuning into the broadcast as we keep you informed on a number of issues that are taking place not only here stateside, but around the world as well. Yesterday was the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church. And some of you are saying, well, Jim, that's old news. Why are we talking about it today? Because, folks, the fact is the persecution did not stop yesterday. The plight of persecuted Christians did not end yesterday. The people who are suffering were not released and sent back to their homes and told to go build your churches and you can start worshiping freely again. No, folks, this is a daily issue that we need to ever have before our minds as to what is going on. Scripture says in Hebrews 13, verse 3, to remember them that are in bonds as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity as being yourselves also in the body. We're going to be talking today about the plight of the persecuted church and the persecution of believers and its escalation worldwide. It's our privilege to have with us today Dr. Moeller, President of Open Doors USA. And brother, thank you so much for joining us today here on Crosstalk.
It's a real pleasure to be with you again, Jim.
If you would, as we take a broad look, a broad scope, do you have any idea as to the number of Christians who are suffering worldwide on account of their faith?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we all know that Jesus said that if you want to be my disciple, you'll be persecuted, and blessed are those who are persecuted. So in one sense, all of us who struggle, sometimes we struggle with family members who are hostile to our belief. Sometimes it's coworkers. Sometimes it's just speaking out in our communities for Christian values that brings us opposition. That's one definition of persecution. But the kind of persecution that we deal with and support around the world at Open Doors is felt by nearly 200 million Christians in over 60 countries. And that's the kind of persecution that really, comes down as a crushing weight economically and discrimination, isolation, sometimes even arrest, torture, and, as we all know, martyrdom for their faith in Jesus Christ.
In light of this staggering number, Doctor, what do you view as being the response of the church in America toward the plight of the persecuted church? Is it one of awareness? Is it one of apathy? What do you sense?
Well, I believe it's a growing awareness. We have to be candid. Much of America has not seen this because our own experience has, for many, many decades, been one of relative affluence and a lack of any sort of overt external persecution. But as the circumstances change, and I believe that we're seeing more and more restriction on our own liberties here in America as Christians, and we're seeing around the globe more and more radical religions like radical Islam and radical Hinduism becoming more visible to our daily awareness, we're starting to ask more questions. How does this affect Christians in those places? I mean, how do Christians in Pakistan or Iran survive every day? And I think it's becoming a growing awareness, but it's still a long way to go. Most Americans just really don't know what's taking place among Christian communities around the world.
Do you find there's interest or apathy?
I find that when people know, Americans are most amazing people. We are generous and sensitive, and we are, despite the caricatures of many across the globe, we're probably the most giving and sensitive people that the planet has ever known. And so when I tell people, when I have the opportunity to explain to them and show them pictures and tell the stories of our persecuted brothers and sisters, their hearts break. Most Americans are very willing at that point to do something, anything. pray, give, go, whatever it takes to help persecuted Christians. But, the vast majority of Americans, unfortunately, don't ever get to hear that message.
Mm-hmm.
I can only be in so many places at one time.
Now, let's also look at the intensity of the persecution. Share with us what you're observing since we turned the century here compared to what we saw 10 or 20 years ago.
Yes, good point. Our organization worldwide, Open Doors International, has for years produced a list of the countries that are, I would call, the Hall of Shame for how they treat Christians in their countries, and we call it the World Watch List. This World Watch List ranks countries by severity of persecution, and what we're observing is that persecution is definitely on the increase. Our organization was founded 55 years ago, and it was founded in a world vastly different than the world we find ourselves in today. The world then was primarily divided between the communist world and what we called the free world. And there we concentrated many of our efforts for the first decades of our existence in serving the underground church behind the Iron Curtain and in China and in other places that were communist. Well, today we see a world that has vastly changed. Communism is definitely on the way out. Eastern Europe no longer really has a communist influence, although there's certain areas where it's never really left. But the vast majority of persecution today of Christians takes place in the Muslim world. In fact, 4 out of 5 of the countries in our World Watch list are Islamic countries where Christians are most heavily persecuted.
Let's take a look at some of these. The number 1 country in your World Watch list is North Korea. Fill us in. What's happening there?
Well, North Korea is it's probably the worst place on earth, period, for any reason. But for Christians, it's particularly heinous. Ever since the first dictator since World War II of the communist country of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, started focusing his hatred on Christians because he realized in his own experience that Christianity represented a real challenge to his power. But Christians there have been horribly persecuted for 60 years with Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, the current dictator, and now there's a new dictator that's waiting in the wings to take over, the son of Kim Jong-il, and that's Kim Jong-un. And that dictator promises only to continue the horrible policies of his father and grandfather on the people of North Korea. We are just praying right now for the estimated 200,000 Christians that are in labor camps right now for their faith in Jesus Christ.
Could you give us an idea what happens in these labor camps?
It's really unspeakable. I'm hesitant to compare it to anything less than the pictures we have of Auschwitz or perhaps of the old stories of the Soviet Gulag in Siberia. It's particularly heinous is a camp called Yoduk. Yoduk camp is a place where tens of thousands of Christians are, and it is a place where they are routinely underfed, underclothed in the harsh winters that are particular to that part of North Korea, and they are worked literally to death in many cases. And thousands go there and simply disappear. We never hear from them again. I believe one day when North Korea is truly free and those camps are liberated, we will have the same sort of horrific reaction to Yoduk as we have today about pictures of Auschwitz.
What is the state of the church in North Korea? Is this something that is causing the church to be disparaged or growing?
Well, it's a paradox. I like to say that persecution always has a paradox, and that is wherever persecution is taking place, it is because of and it is related to the growth of the church. So persecution is most intense in North Korea, but we also see an incredible passion for the North Koreans themselves who've come to faith in Jesus Christ to share their faith in Jesus and their hope in Jesus, despite all of the obvious penalties for doing so. We see the church growing there, underground, in secret, much like the house church in China grew for many decades under persecution. We see that same thing taking place in North Korea, and yet the persecution has never been worse, and Christians have never faced more desperate circumstances there.
Number 2 on your list is Iran. Describe for us what's happening there.
Well, I don't think I have to introduce Iran to anyone listening, because it is a horrible place where liberties are often, conditioned on someone's faithfulness to Shia Islam. And those that would violate the strict dictates of the Ayatollahs will find themselves in opposition. I just have a news bulletin today, and we were actually talking with one of our coworkers this weekend about how the Supreme Ayatollah of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, just this weekend issued a decree condemning and calling on the cessation of house church movements within Iran. And it's truly a chilling reality that the full weight of the Islamic regime of Iran is going to come down on the Christian community there. We already know that they have no problem stoning those that are accused of blasphemy of Islam in that country.
Dr. Moeller, if I could interrupt you just a moment, because what you're saying is in total contradiction to what we're hearing today. Islam is a peaceful religion.
Well, I hesitate to say that the only versions of Islam out there today that are peaceful are those that don't take the words of the Quran seriously. And in many ways, those that are serious about their faith in Islam gravitate towards the most extreme violence, because that's what the Quran teaches. I could go into great detail on this, but Iran is a classic example of a regime that said, we will get back to the book, our book, the Quran. We will get back to faithfulness to the Quran, and look at the regime that results from it. It's really an extremely dangerous place for Christians, and yet, again, the church there is growing. Jesus is appearing to believers in dreams and visions. They are coming to first-hand faith in Jesus Christ through satellite broadcasts, and Christians themselves in Iran, Iranian believers, are at great risk sharing their faith in Jesus Christ with their neighbors and friends, and the church is growing despite the opposition.
Tell us about those house churches. Is this small pockets? Is it multiple house churches throughout the region? Describe that for us, if you would.
Well, because Iran has a traditional church, Armenians mostly, ethnic Armenians who've followed Jesus Christ. There is a visible church in Iran. It's persecuted, and it's limited, and it's extremely constrained. But it's been there for centuries. But there is a vast movement of underground cell church believers that are growing in Iran, and they're growing sometimes in as small a community as just two families or one family even, seeing a satellite television broadcast, coming to faith in Jesus, and wondering, who could I ever tell that I follow Jesus Christ? But we're engaged in networking those cells into a common awareness that there is a movement going on within Iran. We hesitate to number those, but we do know that it's well into the high hundreds of thousands of Muslims who've come to faith in Jesus Christ in the last few years alone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking today with Dr. Carl Moeller, president of Open Doors USA. Yes, yesterday was the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church, but we continue to bring this effort before you here because of the fact that there are many countries, yes, in the world today, where Christians are martyred for their faith. Believers in Afghanistan facing death threats. Christians in Uzbekistan, Nigeria, and other countries all around the world are facing violence, imprisonment, and even death. There are places in the world, such as North Korea, where acts of persecution are taking place, and we don't even see or hear some of these atrocities that are taking place. Today, we're hoping to open your eyes to the plight of the persecuted church, and we'll give you some action steps as well. But stay with us. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, has it finally happened? Can computers outthink humans?
No, they can't, Chris. Now, they can outperform humans on some difficult tasks, but they're not really thinking. For instance, calculators can do mathematical manipulations much more quickly and accurately than humans. But keep in mind, they were designed by humans and programmed to do these various tasks. They're not thinking, they're just doing the things they were designed to do. No, Chris, machines can't actually think, nor do they exercise real judgment. This is reserved for mankind, created in the image of God, just like it says back in Genesis.
Thanks, Dr. Morris. For more information on the foundational principles set forth in Genesis, simply visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org. This is Chris O'Brien. God bless.
The persecution of believers is intensifying worldwide, and we're here to just heighten your awareness to what is taking place so that you can better pray, so that you can better be on guard yourself, and to take a stand on the issues that bring persecution your way. Oh, not on the level of what we're seeing take place across the world. But, ladies and gentlemen, we can obtain strength and hope and boldness even by those who are suffering on account of their faith. We're talking today with Dr. Carl Moeller, president of Open Doors USA. And, folks, I encourage you to check out their website, and you can obtain this world watch list of the number of countries around the world. Matter of fact, just by clicking on them, you can pull off a little paragraph summary with specific prayer requests for that nation. And as they list the top 50 nations, folks, every 50 days you can be praying over and over for these different countries and be praying for persecuted brothers and sisters in Christ. As we're talking, Dr. Moeller, we've touched briefly, I know, and we could spend, I'm sure, an entire program just talking about North Korea, just talking about Iran. Saudi Arabia, though, is number 3 on your list. Help us understand what's going there. I mean, we've seen this as being a friendly nation toward the United States.
Yeah, that's one of the amazing things, isn't it? I mean, that Saudi Arabia is an ally of ours in the region. At least that's the way our government would indicate. And unfortunately, in the case of Saudi Arabia, for example, economics and geopolitics speaks louder than one of the most basic values we have in America, and that's religious freedom. Saudi Arabia has no religious freedom. In fact, it's governed by a strict sect of Islam called Wahhabism, and in Wahhabism there is a limitation on the rights of anyone to practice faith outside of strict Islam, and women are severely constrained in their rights as well. We've had reports of Christians having their hands cut off in Saudi Arabia because of being accused of defaming or touching unceremonially a Quran, which of course is just barbaric, and yet this is a country that we consider a geopolitical ally, and it's really quite troubling that we would kind of check in our Christian American values of religious liberty just because they happen to have a lot of oil or happen to have a lot of influence in the region.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to jump down to number 9 on your list, which is Laos, and I know some of those who are ministering there. Laos is not friendly toward Christianity, is it?
No, it really isn't. And, again, many times our eye in America moves quickly from one thing to another, and Southeast Asia has largely left the awareness of many Americans, but it's not gone from us here in Southern California, where I live, because of the large population of Southeast Asians as refugees from that area. And many of them fled that area precisely because of the incredible opposition in Laos, in parts of Cambodia, in Myanmar, of course, and of course Vietnam. All of these countries still today persecute believers, especially those that would be part of movements that are opposed to the government in that country. And the Christians in many of the tribal areas bear the worst brunts of all. Some of these tribal areas are not only discriminated against racially, but precisely because most of them have become Christians, they're easy targets for these dictatorship governments.
I'm going to look at 2 further countries and then some of the practical things as far as what believers here stateside can be doing. But number 13 on your list is China. And again, I see this being on the World Watch list that you have for persecuted believers, and then I look at all the trade and the partnerships that go on between the United States and China. It's rather appalling in light of all the human rights abuses going on there.
Well, China continues to be one of the worst abusers of human rights. That's not just Christians saying that. That's really anyone who observes how China treats its dissidents. China is still a communist country. It continues to exercise very heavy-handed control over numerous areas of their society. And it's very interesting because an old Chinese proverb says, and I agree with it, anything you say about China is true somewhere. In China. And in some parts of China, many listeners will know, well, they've been to China, and they went to a church, and it was 5,000 people were there, and it was wide open, and it was a beautiful message, and that's all true. But there are many regions in China, even today, where Christian Sunday schools, if they're discovered, those teachers will be thrown in prison. We have dozens of Christian workers who are still in prison today without benefit of trial, and that's taking place in a country that we have a huge debt that they own, and again, economics often clouds our vision when it comes to our national policies. It's very difficult for us to speak out against Chinese human rights abuses when they hold so much of our economy in their hands.
And I'm going to make one further jump down on your list, and it surprised me it was as far down on the list as it is. It's number 17 on the World Watch list, which is the country of Iraq. And I expected to see it up higher on the list, but we know that great persecution has taken place there.
Well, and it is moving up strongly in this next year, I can almost guarantee you, because of the events that have unfolded in recent weeks. The extreme pressure on the Christian community there has resulted in what I'm calling an effort of religicide by Al-Qaeda to literally destroy the presence of Christianity in that country. It truly is going to be very high on our list for next year. But one of the things that we do is we actually take the surveys and on the ground data from coworkers and church leaders all throughout these countries and compile them, and then we rank them. So a given country may have, India for example, thousands of cases, but because it's such a vast country and it's so big, there might not be the high rank as other places. In other words, Iraq next year will be higher because both the number and the intensity of those episodes of persecution have increased.
Dr. Moeller, is it true that Christianity in Iraq predates Islam?
Oh, it does. In fact, Christianity in the Middle East in general, Egypt, Syria, Israel and Palestine, and Iraq have ancient Christian churches that are from the time of the apostles. And this is documented. Iraq was a province of the Chaldean bishop during many centuries, and of course Islam did not come into existence until the 600s. So between AD 0, when Jesus lived, and the apostles in the first century took the gospel to the known world, and the 7th century when Islam started to propagate, Christianity was the leading religion of that area. So every Christian who is part of that ancient Christian community in Iraq can trace their roots all the way back to the apostles. And of course, the Iraqi Muslims would rather see those Christians become extinct.
Well, I find this very interesting as we talk about this in light of the president's recent trip, and I'd like to get your comment on his recent trip. Here's a headline from MSNBC. Building bridges, Obama courts Muslims. In Indonesia, president says he's trying to tackle misunderstanding and mistrust. The president said last Tuesday that Washington's effort to reach out to the Muslim world would help improve U.S. security. Let me say that again, folks. The Washington's effort to reach out to the Muslim world would help improve U.S. security, although he acknowledged that there was still more work to do. Dr. Moeller, give us your reaction to this trip, and also I want to find out if you fear the Islamization of America.
Wow, those are big questions. Jim, do we have another half an hour? I can say this. Either our president is sadly ignorant and misinformed, or he is being intentionally duplicitous when it comes to the facts. And I hesitate to say the latter because I do know that he is well informed about the situations there on the ground. Indonesia, for example, the country he was in, is one of the worst places on earth as a persecutor of Christians. In the past, there have been huge riots, burning Christian churches in large numbers and killing Christians by extremist Muslims. We all know that parts of Indonesia, Bali, for example, are the hotbeds of radical Islam. And, it's in fact a real deception to the world for us to say that a regime like Indonesia is moderate. Yes, there is a Christian community there in the cities that is left largely alone, but in many provinces of that country, Christians are a marked target for terrorism. And do I fear the Islamization of the United States? Well, I do trust in the Lord, and I do believe that American Christians are beginning to wake up to the fact that our freedoms are being eroded. So I believe that there will be an awakening that will prevent us from becoming more Islamicized. But if you don't have to look very far. All you have to do is look to England, to the UK, to Amsterdam and the Netherlands and many parts of Europe like France and Germany as well, where Islamic law is now governing literally whole cities because the people there who are largely Islamic themselves have voted city councils and city regulations into effect that basically make those cities Islamic zones. That's a real challenge to Europe. It's a real challenge to the culture. And while we believe in the free marketplace of ideas, Christianity has no fear of Islam. It's when legal structures and the debate is not allowed that we believe that there's real loss of freedoms. I'm praying for America. I'm praying that we wake up and that we recognize when our freedoms are being challenged that the persecuted church is experiencing some of those things themselves, and that we need to learn the lessons of how to survive under persecution from them.
And folks, I mean, we're just witnessing what took place in the state of Oklahoma on Election Day, November 2nd, in which the citizens of the state voted overwhelmingly to bar the state from imposing Sharia into their court system there, or international law to determine the course of their legal proceedings there. And immediately there have been court cases now filed to challenge the will of the people on this regard. And certainly we need to keep our eye tuned to that issue. Dr. Moeller, as it comes to what can the church here in the United States do in relation to this? I mean, we're talking half a world away. Many of these believers are suffering on account of their faith. What can we do?
Yeah, that's great. We have a campaign going on right now called Free to Believe, and it's using our voice in advocacy to speak up for the rights of religious liberty all around the world, and in particular in the Muslim world. But we recognize that once we begin this process, we can begin to recognize the parallels between our own loss of religious liberties and what is taking place among Christians around the world. Right now we have had over 200,000 Open Door supporters worldwide take action by signing this petition, and we would offer that to people at our website at opendoorsusa.org. People can go there, sign that petition. I'll be in Washington, D.C. the first week of December to deliver signed petitions to congressmen and women on behalf of Christians around the world, saying you need to send a word to all of these countries around the world that have these blasphemy laws that make Christians targets for the legal systems. So people can do that, and they can also pray. That's the most important thing we can do.
And we're going to take a break right here and pick up on that. And folks, stay with us. We're going to give you some specific ways you can pray, and you can even write to persecuted believers. How can you do it? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
For some people, work is tedious and boring, something to endure until the weekend arrives. For others, work is everything. It consumes them and their time. Some find no meaning or satisfaction in their jobs. Others find too much. But both lack an eternal perspective, a biblical framework through which they can evaluate what they spend most of their lives doing. In the booklet, What is Vocation?, author Stephen Nichols provides a biblical framework for work. Work as ordained by God has meaning and purpose, and by understanding your own vocation, you too can say with the psalmist, "Yes, establish the work of our hands." To receive your copy of the booklet, What is Vocation? Send a donation of $5 or more to VCY America, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. To make your donation by phone, call 1-800-729-9829, 1-800-729-9829.
Again, folks, the website is opendoorsusa.org. Check out the site, and you'll learn a lot of information about these countries. We could spend hours, I mean literally hours, if not days, going through country by country and really breaking down what's going to happen. Time does not avail for us to do that, but I do want to look at some action steps here today as we're speaking with Dr. Carl Moeller. As I began the program, to remember them that are in bonds as bound with them. Dr. Moeller, how is it that we can pray effectively for the persecuted church?
Well, the number one thing that the persecuted church needs and that they tell us they need is prayer. We have numerous prayer resources, again, at our website for people to learn specific facts about countries where they can pray and specific stories of Christians like Asia Noreen, Pakistani Christian mother of 5 who has been sentenced to death, if you can believe, for blasphemy in Pakistan. And right now we're asking people to pray for her and to pray that the courts there would get some sense and that they would intervene and prevent her from being killed. We need to pray for our brothers and sisters in Iraq, for example, who have been brutalized by Al-Qaeda and terrorists. Just 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago now, that almost 60 Christians were killed in a terrorist attack against a church, and it was this huge tragedy is just part of an ongoing effort by Al-Qaeda to make Christians legitimate targets. We need to pray. We need to pray that the hand of God protects His church in Iraq and preserves it. So people can find out about all of these things and specific points of prayer for the church that they can make and that they can mobilize others to pray as well.
And that's something I appreciate about your website, because you talk about these different nations through the watch list, and then you have specific prayer requests. For instance, I'm holding my hand for North Korea. After you talk about their plight there, it says, then pray for boldness and protection for those seeking to share the good news. Ask God to strengthen 50 to 70,000 Christians detained in labor camps. Many are desperately short of food. Pray that help will reach those who need it most. And we see specific prayer requests for each country that you list on your watch list that people can pray with fervency as well as with specificity as it relates to praying for those in need. Not only is prayer important, but in addition to that, you have a opportunity for people here in the States to write to persecuted believers.
Yeah, that's right. We organize several times a year different writing campaigns, letter writing campaigns, and right now we have one that is really vital, and it's really crucial that people take a moment to write a note of encouragement to persecuted believers in Iraq right now. And if they go to our website again at opendoorsusa.org, they can click on the Get Involved, Write Iraq campaign, and they can write a letter. Mm-hmm. They can send a very simple encouragement in English using God's Word and their own thoughts and prayers. And I'll tell you this firsthand, because our coworkers there find opportunities to translate these letters. And I was with one widow of a martyr in Turkey not too long ago, and she and her children were there in their apartment when I came, and their entire apartment had these little strings all the way around the walls, and on these strings were just card after card and letter after letter from Christians all around the world.
Wow.
And she literally said, there are many days when I feel so alone because my husband was murdered for his faith, that I read these cards and letters and I am upheld by the strength of the Lord, because I know that Christians are praying and thinking about us. So we can do a big thing in helping Christians by writing letters.
Again, folks, access that information, because they have a list of things that you need to to not put in a letter, and some very important information on the do's and don'ts of letter writing there, and just about how long it should be, and keeping it simple, etc. So visit their site, opendoorsUSA.org, and you'll find that information there. So you can pray, you can write letters. Anything else that comes to your mind?
I would say simply this. I think that there's a tremendous need in some of these places. We just finished the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church, and it's vitally important that we pray for persecuted believers. But we need to remember, too, Jim, that they're praying as well. But their prayers are somewhat different than ours. Their prayers are for protection and for provision, for God to intervene in some of these cases. And in some cases, like refugees in Iraq or other places, they need basic food, clothing, medical supplies, and various other things, including Bibles, that will encourage them spiritually. So when I say we need to pray for the persecuted church, there's another thing we can do as well, and that is we can be the answer to the prayers of the persecuted church. You see, when they pray for those things, they are depending on God for them, but we get the privilege of doing some of those things for them so that they can give God the glory and give Him the praise for meeting and answering their prayers.
And the way they can get a list of those items, is that through your website as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but it's at opendoorsUSA.org, and people can find numerous ways that they can help specific projects or the general help for persecuted Christians all around the world.
Well, I do mean to be repetitive, and that is opendoorsUSA.org. And folks, check out the website. I'd like to open our phone lines, and you can call right now with your questions. Maybe there's a country of interest to you. Maybe there's something that Dr. Moeller has said that you need further clarification, or have a concern or a question or comment you'd like to make. Our number to Crosstalk is 800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. Perhaps your eyes have been opened today to the plight of the persecuted church, and to the growing, the intensity of the need to be praying. And we'd sure like to hear from you today, even if this has touched your heart, to say, yes, I'm going to be more committed in my prayers and my efforts for the persecuted church. Our number 800-733-9829. Just before we go to the lines here, Doctor, if you would share with us about concerns on this UN defamation or religious resolution.
Yeah, this is the thing. The UN is a hotbed for extremism, anti-American, anti-Christian efforts. As we all know, the UN is a place where the most radical fringe gets to dominate the discussion. And right now, there's a resolution being debated in the UN that has been debated and passed year after year. We're quite concerned about it, if it continues to pass, that it will ultimately become a binding protocol on all member countries, including the United States. And that is what they call an anti-defamation of religions resolution. Now, that might sound confusing, or might even sound pretty good if you listen to it. Well, who wants to blaspheme or defame a religion? But you see, the problem is it's promoted by Islamic countries, almost totally exclusively pro-Islamic countries. And what does it mean? It means that anyone who preaches the gospel of Jesus Christ to a Muslim is blaspheming Islam. Because you're saying you need to convert from Islam to Christianity, that means you're saying bad things about Islam, and that would be strictly prohibited by the UN if this resolution becomes a protocol. So we are working very, very hard to get many nations to turn their votes to recognize the absolute insanity of this resolution. But it's precisely this kind of thing that Pakistan is using to sentence this woman, this dear sister, Asia Noreen, to death by hanging, simply because she's accused by someone of being a blasphemer to Islam. And now that's not true.
Wouldn't this also work against them, though, from launching persecution against Christians?
Well, you would think so, but of course, the way these are written, Christianity is not blasphemed by someone converting from Christianity to Islam. For them, that represents just a positive progression.
Wow.
So it is a completely it's almost Orwellian, if you know what I mean by that. It's almost Orwellian in taking language that we would look at and go, oh, that's okay, and putting behind it a doublespeak, another meaning that means no. What this really will do is produce incredible hardship and incredible violence against Christians globally if this becomes a protocol.
And contacting U.S. senators, I guess, would be the course of action there.
Well, what we're doing, yes, the most powerful means we have at our disposal is contacting the U.S. Senate and Congress with a resolution, a letter that will come from our Congress to the UN, and we can get thousands of Americans to sign it. We'll get almost every member of Congress and Senate to sign this letter saying to the UN, look, this legislation, this protocol that you're debating is absolutely antithetical to all human rights.
Daniel in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Hello. Are there any nations where the ruling majority, so-called Christian church, actively suppresses or persecutes true Christians or the true church?
That is an excellent question, and I have to acknowledge the fact that there are Christians, there are Christian groups in certain countries that are in the dominant power, and they oppress more evangelical and Pentecostal groups as a result, whether they're Catholic, Orthodox, or mainline Protestant groups in some countries. These power-centric churches often also persecute growing evangelical and Pentecostal groups in homes. So, yeah, that does happen too. It's not simple for us to just say it's only against Christians. Sometimes it's Christians persecuting other Christians, and we have to be speaking out on behalf of the full body of Christ wherever it is, regardless of who's doing the persecuting.
Thank you, Daniel, for the call. Next to Appleton, and Greg, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm calling. I was just shocked to hear that there were so many countries out there that are actively persecuting against Christians. But I wanted to specifically comment on the anti-defamation measure. I'm in complete support of what you're saying, that we should definitely not stop that, given sort of what you said about it. But the real question that I have is it's about the woman you said who was the widow of a martyr?
Yes.
Yes. I think that the reason that the anti-defamation clause of religion is a bad one is because it's absolutely ridiculous that somebody would let his family go and die because he believes in Jesus or Muhammad or Allah, anything. As opposed to just being rational and realizing that it's all just fairy tales.
Well, I hate to disagree with you on your basic assumption, and that is, I believe firmly that there are some things spiritual that are worth dying for. And in this case, while it did cause great hardship to his family, both his family and he, I know in his statements, would say that this is truly worth dying for. And why? Because there's a spiritual reality of knowing Jesus that underscores the fact that Christians for centuries have recognized Jesus is who he says he is. He's Lord. And if that's the case, then there are opportunities for us to share the good news. And sometimes, as the Bible also very clearly says, people who are encountering that good news are angered by it, and they lash out with violence. So it's going to happen.
And certainly, Greg, they're not dying on behalf of fairy tales, but the truth of the gospel. Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners. And certainly we trust that you also will come to know the truth of the Lord Jesus Christ as well. Appreciate your call. We have a break upon us, and we'll come back to more of your phone calls with Dr. Carl Moeller in just 1 minute. Stay with us.
Even the secular media is now recognizing the coming of world government. Gideon Rachman, writing on FinancialTimes.com with an article entitled, "And Now for World Government," says, quote, I never believed that there's a secret United Nations plot to take over the U.S. I've never seen black helicopters hovering in the sky above Montana. But for the first time in my life, I think the formation of some sort of world government is plausible. He says the financial crisis and climate change are pushing national governments toward global solutions, even in countries such as China and the U.S. that are traditionally fierce guardians of national sovereignty, end quote. So what is our response as Christians? Our response as Christians is to understand that God foretold us there would be a one world government, a one world religion, and a one world economical structure, all led by a one world leader. We truly are living in the last days. It's urgent that we as Christians are out sharing the good news of the gospel through faith and repentance in Jesus Christ. If you want more information on understanding the times, our website's worldviewweekend.com, worldviewweekend.com.
Oh, there certainly are those who have their understanding darkened, but keep in mind that the prince of this world is the deceiver. He is a deceiver, and certainly to have the truth of the gospel go forth, and there are those who are suffering, and certainly that's why we remember those that are in bonds as being bound with them, and them would suffer adversity as being yourselves also in the body. Taking your calls here today at Crosstalk. Our next call is from Birmingham, England, and Robert, thank you for calling in today.
Thank you. Just to 2 points quickly. Firstly, to encourage Dr. Moeller that here in England we're also getting signatures for this petition.
Excellent.
And a week today I shall be putting in the post several copies of it to the Open Doors headquarters here in Britain. So I hope you're encouraged by that.
I am. Thank you.
And the second point is, if I may mention another organisation, again British-based, that does very much the same things, as it were, partnership with Open Doors in some ways. Barnabas Fund here in Britain, around the ministry of Patrick and Rosemary Sukdeo. They also have a lot of useful information and prayer points, and they have a branch they call Barnabas Aid that gives practical help directly into situations to support persecuted Christians.
Robert,
if I can just mention the website, barnabasfund.org.
Excellent group. Mm-hmm. Excellent group, and again, we do share a lot of cooperative work around the world on behalf of persecuted Christians. Excellent, brother. Thank you for signing petitions as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
To Albin, Pennsylvania, and Eileen, you're on the air.
Yes. What I would like to know is, how can we be assured that the letters aren't opened? I had a brother, my brother and my sister-in-law were missionaries to China, and they did underground church there. And, of course, there were certain things we couldn't write to them. But I'm just really curious about some of these countries like Iraq and Iran and that. I mean, they're really nasty, and I'm wondering, how can you be assured that they won't get a hold of those letters and just read through the lines?
Dr. Moeller?
That's a great question. I can tell you, really simply put, for high security situations like Iran, for example, if we have a letter writing campaign in Iran or even Pakistan, we'll bring those letters in via courier. We're not known as God's smugglers for nothing. We can bring things in that can go through into some of those countries with the networks of people that we have. So it doesn't have to go necessarily through the post. We assemble those letters mostly here. But secondly, we also, as Jim mentioned, we have really explicit instructions on what to say and what not to say if those letters have any opportunity to be read by authorities. We want to make sure that we don't get the people who are receiving them into trouble. And that's really one of our primary convictions and commitments, is that we are there to serve the persecuted, not to exploit them, not to do anything other than to answer their prayers as they have asked for these things in particular.
And we will give both the website, Eileen, as well as a phone number where you can get those letter writing instructions if you'd like to participate in that. So stay with us. We'll give that here within the next few moments. Again, we'll be giving that both a toll-free number as well as the website. Let's go to Sue in Hermiston, Oregon. You're on the air, Sue.
Dr. Moeller, I made a pledge to the Lord before I knew him that if I ever heard anything that was like the concentration camps, that I would have the courage to do something. The first thing I pledged to you is I'm going to start writing letters to American Jewish people that are still telling the story about the 10 million in Germany, and see if they will help start getting the word out on what's going on in North Korea. Amen.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I want to know, do they have crematoriums there, and is pretty much their lifespan 4 months?
You know, there are horrible things going on, and again, if you want some information on this, you can go through our website to get some other further information. But horrible things in some of these North Korean camps include experimentation on human beings with biological and chemical weapons. This is the nature of the regime in North Korea. It's just truly diabolical, in the same way as the Nazis were. And that's why, although I'm not familiar with more or less a crematorium situation, I imagine they're because the rates of death are so high in these camps because people are worked to death, that there must be something along those lines as well. I know that when liberation comes, we'll know all too well what the methods of murder and torture were going on there.
Sue, thanks for your call. And Jane in McPherson, Kansas, you're on the air.
Hi there. I just wanted to note that the fellow who called and said that it was all just fairy tales anyway would not be allowed to maintain that position if the UN proposition were to go through.
Good point. Excellent. In fact, part of the nature of this Islamic resolution is you're not given the option of being an infidel in their minds. In these countries, it's a blasphemy against Islam to be anything but Islamic. And so whether you're Christian, Jewish, Sikh, or even atheist, you are in violation of the blasphemy laws in a place like Pakistan.
Appreciate your call. We're going to squeeze one last call in from West Allis, Wisconsin. Beth, you're on the air.
Yes, I just have one thing to say. Actually, it's, I don't believe that we should persecute anybody for their faiths, other than there should be some restrictions on some faiths that actually do bodily harm to others. I think that's just kind of common sense. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I see that's really kind of a problem in this whole scenario is that we've gone off and we've lost the message and the essence of Christianity. There are so many different sects. There's, the Baptists, the Methodists, the Pentecostal, the this, the that, whatever, that everybody seems to be more involved in the particular type of Christianity that they follow rather than the essence of Christianity itself. When it first started out...
Beth, thank you so much. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have less than 30 seconds left, and we did promise to give out some more information, but thank you for calling us here today. Dr. Moeller, I do want you to take a moment here, if you would, to give a toll-free number as well as that website address again, where our listeners can obtain this information on the policies for writing, and certainly to be in support of what you're doing there at the organization, as well as to gain the information about what's taking place.
Yeah, our website is opendoorsusa.org, opendoorsusa.org, and also we have a toll-free number that's 888-5, the word Bible 5, 888-5 Bible 5. That's because we deliver Bibles for $5 to the Persecuted Church. But it's a great way for people to get information about where they can pray, and how they can take action on behalf of persecuted Christians.
Dr. Moeller, thank you so much for being with us here today on Crosstalk and awakening us to the plight of the church.
Thank you.
And folks, again, we appreciate you tuning in to Crosstalk as we remember today those that are in bonds.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a cassette or CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.